We have arrived. This is Webb Parton, your host, and we welcome you to the Free Range Dogs podcast. This is a place where we stake out a shady spot and talk about all things dog. Find yourself a soft piece of grass, spin a few circles, plop down, rest your feet, and join us in this joyful conversation. Hi, this is Webb Parton with FreeRangeDogs.com, and I'm really looking forward to our conversation today. We have Kelly Kirby with us, LunaRita Outfitters. He and I are of a similar interest. We're both dog trainers. We're both gun dog trainers. Me past tense, Kelly current. Kind of an auspicious day. Kelly came out with Wes and flatbed trailer, and we tore down a lot of my history today, transferring to Kelly's facility. So a lot of kennel panels and force break table and all that good stuff. Conversation I wanted to have is about gun dog training, not trial training, not obedience work, but actually training a hunting dog. Kelly, introduce yourself.
Hello. One, thank you for having me out. I'm honored to be here. I've known you for many years. And, I was happy you asked me to come out and have some conversation with you.
Well, I know that, we have very similar interests. And you're currently running LunaRita Outfitters.
Yes.
You're located in Patagonia, Arizona.
Correct.
That is sort of the Mearns quail capital of the world.
The Mecca.
Where everyone goes to go for Mearns quail is Sonoyta, Patagonia. And you have a very nice facility. I've done a fair bit of aversion work for you there. And you are currently training hunting dogs for folks. And talk with me about how that interest developed for you.
It all starts with bird hunting. So you get the interest in the bird hunting, and then, just like most people, you start out hunting on foot and walk it up quail, and then you transition and you get your first dog. And after that, it's down the rabbit hole. The way my brain works is once I get an interest, I'm going deep. And so I started working my own dogs and then started training my own dogs. And then as I started doing that, people started taking recognition to the quality of work that my dogs were doing. And then so I just started developing my interest in training, and that kind of spun from there. After I started guiding, I had people asking me if I trained dogs professionally. And then I started. So after my first dogs, I had the interest. I had the mechanics, like most fledgling trainers, I would say. You have the mechanics of the tasks that need to be accomplished, but I really didn't know the why behind what we were doing. And then, it went from there to getting into the psychology. And once you get into the psychology and the actual behavioral conditioning and understanding the drives of these dogs, that's when you become a trainer.
Tarrant told me something years ago. He said that it's not the easy dogs that make a trainer, it's the hard ones.
That's a very good point.
Yeah.
And I had no intentions of becoming this trainer. It just sort of happened. I'm starting to get recognized as the problem dog solver. And that wasn't my goal. It just,
slippery slope.
Yep. It's the, anybody that's worked with me or has trained with me knows my motto. You own the dog that you own, and we don't know what we don't know. So no fault of anyone. You don't know what you're getting into a lot of times with a first bird dog, and mistakes are made. And you had to figure out how to solve those. So yes, the easy dogs are just that. The hard dogs make a trainer.
Yeah. I know that for me, I started, and another trainer, Glenn Seal.
Mm-hmm.
Did you ever know Glenn?
I know the name. So
okay.
I know who you're talking about.
Yeah, Glenn was a dear man. And he literally filled our dance card. I'd met him. I'd taken 3 dogs to him to snake break.
Mm-hmm.
And we developed a friendship. He showed me how to snake break. That was originally where I first saw it happen. This would have been in the mid 80s, or like 84, maybe 85, maybe. And no, it would have been later than that. It would have been 87. And he was at that point where he was going to stop training bird dogs. Mm-hmm. He said he had been on the pro circuit for a number of years running short hairs. And back in those days, he said he made $8 a day campaigning a short hair. Or excuse me, $10 a day campaigning a short hair. He and his wife, Ann, you don't have, you're a dog trainer, you don't have retirement, you know. So what they had done, anytime they had a little bit of extra money, they just kept adding on kennel runs, and they developed a boarding kennel. And so they would board dogs for folks who were traveling, going out of town or whatever. And for that, he made $8 a day. And so he said he didn't have to do the math too long to figure out where his focus should be.
Yes.
And so he stopped training. He stopped the circuit, and he just did aversion work, and he funded all his training work to me. And that started us, many years ago. And, back then it was different. Because crawlers didn't have rheostats. It was a kind of a different world.
Yes. The GPS was a radio antenna.
A telemetry gear. Mm-hmm. And the houndsmen had telemetry gear.
Yep.
But we didn't, and that later on I did use telemetry gear, but, it was a very long learning curve. And I spent a long time reading books, and really fortunate to, be blessed to meet folks who were good trainers and learned a lot from them. But I know that my interest, much as you described, as a kid growing up, I didn't have a lot of aspirations. I wanted to shoot birds. I wanted to watch dogs run away.
Right.
That's where my true motivations were. And that's kind of what I did, and so my interest has always been in hunting dogs, not in trial dogs. And I don't mean to demean that in any way.
Not at all.
Because I think there's some real benefit in folks who pay attention to the breeding and pay attention to the bloodlines. But I was interested in finding a way to make a dog be the best he could be. And that always was through their genetics, was through giving them what they needed, giving them birds, giving them open ground, letting them run, giving them structure. And I would, again, that term problem dog, that's, people don't bring you a dog when everything went right. When something went wrong, they don't know how to fix it. Then they show up the door with 3 boxes of parts and ask you to put it back together.
Yes. And often it's I've made these mistakes. I realize I made these mistakes. Help me. Right. The downside to that is, and I'm sure it's happened to you over the years, is the gun shy dogs where errors were made to me, that's the biggest challenge. Most anything else, usually you can fix it. Gun shyness, I always say the 2 biggest, frightening things as a started dog is, getting a young dog on its first birds and then getting past that gun condition. Once you get that done, everything else you can kind of work around, but you can't mess those up. But yeah, the same as you, I'm into hunting dogs. I don't compete. I never have done any competitions, no trial work. I've attended and observed. I train meat dogs. That's what I call them. They are hunting dogs. They're not competition. I'm not setting them with any real rules or standards other than accomplishing the task. And as a trainer, I work for someone. They're not my dogs. And I always tell my clients, it doesn't matter what I want your dog to do. What do you want your dog to do? And we'll train to that level, not judging any of it. So yeah, that's a little bit different on a different side of the trainer. And I think that's the same thing you've done through the years.
Right. Yeah. And I, typically I would hope that my folks would have an understanding of where it broke. Because a lot of times they either don't, or they don't want to say, or they feel a little guilty. Or Glenn Seal many years ago told me a story about he working, training a short hair for somebody, and dog came in and it would not carry a bird. Didn't want to be around a human being and a dead bird. Okay, so that tells you there's a break right there somewhere. And he worked with that dog, and the man swore up and down he didn't know what was wrong with the dog, breeding, whatever, something was wrong with his dog. They wouldn't carry a bird, wouldn't give him a bird. And, Glenn just backed off and gave him some safety, and then tried to develop that curiosity, and then put him with other dogs to try and develop an enthusiasm or drive. And pretty soon the dog is getting comfortable, because he's competing with other dogs about birds. And next thing you know, he's carrying birds. And next thing you know, he's giving birds to Glenn. And so Glenn, calls his owner and says, come and take a look at what we got. And shoots a bird for him. Dog goes out, picks up, brings back, give it to him. And the man was just shocked. He said he hadn't done that since I kicked him that time. So
there it is.
There it is. And, right.
You perfectly led into it perfectly. As I was going to say, there's always a point when I am training a dog for a client that if there is an issue, at some point, the confession happens. And I don't pressure anyone. You know something happened. Because in dogs, it's either they're genetic behaviors that are bred in this dog, and then everything else is environmental. Environmental behaviors are things that we've done. We've done it right or we've done it wrong. Keeping everything positive when it's a puppy. And the worst ones are the ones that are unintentional and they really, truly have no idea what happened. And they didn't see what happened. And it could be, it can always be something innocent. A young puppy found a dead bird randomly and picked it up at the same time something negative happened, and you get an association that you may not be aware that it happened. But for the most part, I think we've had the discussion actually earlier today, discouraging those natural behaviors. And we don't realize as pet owners in our home that we're doing it. And pointing breeds that don't have the strongest drive for retrieving, any discouragement of carrying something in their mouth as a puppy is going to carry over. And it's just things that don't click with our brains as humans, that we're actually altering a behavior that's going to affect the dog in the field. Because you're thinking, when it's me, I don't want that dog picking up my shoe and chewing on it. To the dog, it's, you don't want me picking up stuff with my mouth. So you just inhibited that retrieve drive unintentionally. There was no malice. You didn't know. That's where I say we don't know what we don't know. And that's also part of our job as a trainer.
Yeah. I remember years ago, our first Jessie, she at a very young age, just very precocious and just scary smart. And nothing hits the water like a Jessie. And so I would send her on a mark and I'd bring her back, and I wanted her to leave water, come across the bank, deliver the bird before she thought about shaking, right? And I worked real hard to develop that in a very positive way. And had, the kid was doing everything right, 5 months old, 6 months old. And then Nicole went out with her, and in one session, she didn't want her shaking water by her, so she stopped her at the bank. And I fought that from that point on,
And there was no concept that you're interrupting a process. Right. And we've all done it. Right. Even as trainers, even pros that we've been doing it for years, we make mistakes. I try to instill this in all my handlers, the dog owners, that, don't train angry. If you're emotional, it's feeding that dog. Your dog is, these dogs are masters of body language. I can even fake it like I'm in a good mood. And the dog's going to reach you. You'll hear, it's the old adage that your emotions travel down the leash to that dog. And they do. Mm-hmm. Dog is reading us all the time. Mm-hmm. Good, bad, or indifferent. So knowing when to train, when not to train, there's so many little nuances. Timing is the biggest thing that I have trouble getting people to understand, is that, and this is science, it's not my opinion, the 1.4 second rule, I call it the 2 second rule. You got a 2 second window to reward or correct a dog. And if you do not use that window, it has no idea what it's being exactly corrected or rewarded for. So, getting that timing and that awareness of when to apply it is one of the more difficult parts. And it's difficult even as a trainer. I think that's where when clicker training really came around and started becoming popular, and understanding that you're using that and the marking that behavior to get that respondent conditioning response, that salivary response for a reward. That kind of changed the game, because that buys you time. You can always remember to click in time, but you may not have, be able to get everything else done. So timing is a critical one that I always I don't want to say, I'll say a soapbox about it with my clients.
Well, I know that for me, and I've heard you make the comment as well. I mean, I can train a dog to do anything, you know. I mean, that isn't the issue. It's the person that owns the dog. Yes. It's the interaction between that person and the dog.
Yes.
That where the challenge is. And I know when I was training, I always made a point to be very open, try and get people to come. I'd include them right in the training, you know, and the more time they spent with me in the field, we were working their dog and other dogs, mm-hmm. the better handlers they became. The more intuitive their affect was when they were with any dog. And that's really, it's kind of a learned thing that you can't really tell a person that.
No, teaching someone to read a dog is, and that's one of the biggest things I see. And Wes, you met Wes, my training assistant. I think that's one of the things he noticed it about me, and he really picked it up on you when you're doing the aversion, is the ability to read a dog. And I can teach you the basic concepts of that, but honestly, there's a whole course you need on the dog's body language, and then you spending time with that dog and understanding its cues. What it's doing when it pushes its ears forward, lays its ears back, dips its shoulders. All of that is stuff that it's individual to the dog. And that's a tough one. Can't really teach that to anyone. You've got to spend time with that dog and observe.
And I know that if I, when I was training, when I'd have my owners there with us, I would really make a point to try and help them understand, in particular, their dog. Mm-hmm. And, you know, some people have a natural ability with that. Some folks don't. Some folks just don't go there. They didn't get that gene, you know?
Yeah, I think it's one, observation skills. And I find if you look at people's career choices, you can usually line it up. Is they have that focus, they have that situational awareness. You know, they're taken in a room when they go in that room, that kind of mentality of, and that's kind of what it takes, because you have to be able to do 10 things at one time. I was joking with one of my guides the other day. I was joking, clients are asking why you charge so much for your training, as I'm standing there videoing with an iPhone, shooting a shotgun with one arm with 3 remotes, a dog, a launcher, a pigeon, all at one time, looking at it going, yeah, I don't understand why I charge this much either.
Yeah. I used to, I'd have a remote release transmitter. I'd have the transmitter for the dog. I'd have a 410 shotgun, mm-hmm. 870 that I would shoot one-handed. Yes. So you're flushing a bird, going to the transmitter for the neck collar. So in case they think about breaking on whoa, you can tone them or tap them, and then still have to shoot and kill the bird one-handed. Yeah. And
I found by the end of training season that I can't shoot a shotgun with 2 arms anymore. I have to relearn how to properly shoulder and fire a shotgun, because I've done it one-armed for months.
Oh, that's funny. It should be a whole school of shooting.
Trainer 101.
That's it.
Learn to shoot one-handed.
That's it. Right. Yeah. I really enjoyed training. I have very fond memories of training, and it wasn't so much working with people; it was working with dogs. Mm-hmm. That's what I enjoyed. And I know that we similar paths. I was a guide for a big chunk of my life, mm-hmm. but I did my own booking, and I would train full time, and then I'd break somewhere around mid-November. If it was going to be a good desert bird year, I might break end of October, but that's when I would stop, and I'd try and time my classes, mm-hmm. 3-month classes that would end then. And then I would guide until the end of the season. And so we have a kind of a unique situation now, because we're in the little writing cottage that I've got. Pretty good at acoustics, but you're going to hear a little bit of ambient noise, and that is actually rain in Arizona. Those are raindrops hitting the earth. So you and I are similar in that I guided for a big chunk of my time, mm-hmm. and I would train full time. In some years, depending, I would train all the way through. But the majority of time, I would book 6 to 10 days take a day off and do it again. And I would do that all the way through the season. And I know you guide as well. You focus typically on Mearns quail, or you?
No. So very similar. You almost repeated my schedule. So train all summer. So I usually start up my training cycle in March. So it gives me a couple weeks break after the end of season. So, New Mexico's ending at February 15th. Arizona's right around that. So end of season, take a couple weeks break, and then I start my training cycle up. Training cycle for me is going to run typically to the end of August. And then I'll have maybe 1 month of carryover in October. I take a break for dove. Usually I have several dove hunts that are booking, the first 2 weeks of September. And then it depends if I have any more carryover, because I have a few things going, because I do guide some grouse in Utah, on, certain years. If it's good years up there, we'll do some grouse hunts. And then I usually try to get one personal hunt in. That's my one hunt a year. I go to Kansas, usually end of October, 1st of November. And this year we've added, one of my guides that works for me that also owns his own kennel. We're doing a sharp-tail camp in Nebraska.
Wow.
It sounds vaguely familiar to what we're discussing of all of your writings.
Mm-hmm.
It seems to be I hit the same holes.
Mm-hmm.
So that's typically my cycle. So because of the heat and the snakes and just dealing with dog cycles, November 15th is usually when I really start up. So all 3 species here in Arizona. I do have a lease on a ranch in New Mexico, and if it's good bird years, we do go out there for some bobwhite, mostly scaled. Very similar cycle. And I sprinkle in some big game every now and then, but not me personally. Usually it's my hunts. I have guides that do that for me.
Yeah, my focus is always working alone, doing everything. So, not much daylight.
No.
Unencumbered daylight was a real luxury for me, but I learned a lot. And I know that we would breed setters. That was the dog we had in our string was English setters. And we were 6 generations in when we stopped. So there was something to learn there as well, because there was a predictability in those breedings, because I'd known that dog's, grandmother, grandfather, going back, and I could see in a young dog, a dog generation or 2 before, just uncanny. And you develop a real appreciation of genetics, of just what is in the dog before the fact. So folks, as you stated, folks will just get the wrong dog.
Yes.
Yeah.
And it's not only, not necessarily the wrong dog. All dogs have their place. And all people have the type of dog that probably fits their personality and lifestyle a little bit better. I typically loosely categorize dogs. You've got companion hunters, you've got competition dogs, field trialers, and then you've got guide dogs. And companion hunter person is going to casually hunt a few weekends a year, maybe every weekend throughout quail season or whatever season they're running. They do not need a guide dog.
Yes.
That is not the dog for this person.
Yeah.
It's the old adage of you have too much dog.
Yeah.
And you have to be aware of that. It's not, it's nothing against anyone. It's just the reality of matching these genetic, as a breeder, I'm not a breeder. Don't deal with breeding. I know a lot of breeders, and I have a lot of breeders that refer their dogs strictly to me. And I know their bloodlines now. I know their breeding profiles, and you learn that. But these genetic behaviors in these dogs, you're not going to change. And they're bred into it for generations and generations. And this may just not be the dog for you.
That's a hard conversation to have.
It is, and you have to be fairly delicate about it. But because, I obviously, as guides, as trainers, we don't want to offend anyone, especially our own clients. But the reality is, if, a person that's going to hunt a few times a year does not need a field trial bred GSP or a huge prairie running setter that's going to be a 500-yard dog.
An LU pointer.
Yes, exactly. So companion hunter does not need that. They need a dog that fits what they're going to do. So yeah, you have to dance that a little bit, but it's a conversation that really needs to be had. And I think we were discussing it over lunch was that there almost needs to be so you're going to buy a bird dog class. Give these pros and cons and these tips ahead of time.
Yeah. Well, I know that I've watched you working dogs. We have very similar sort of affect with dogs. And I've enjoyed spending time at your facility and interacting. It's a real community there because you see a lot of folks there when we're doing the trainings.
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah. And I know that I kind of miss that because I don't see a lot of people anymore. Maybe by design, maybe.
Yeah, similar. That's the most human interaction I have, as remote as I am now. Mm-hmm. Clients coming down for weekend training, and then when we're doing snake aversion and people are coming in and have a large group, that's my most social moments at that point. So,
right.
So I spend a lot more time with dogs than I do people.
Yeah. And on your string for guiding,
mm-hmm.
What are you running? Mostly German dogs?
Oh, I am probably the oddball for guides and trainers. One, I've never bought a dog.
Mm-hmm.
All of my dogs are rescues or adoptions. Now, I like to add on, I selectively adopt or rescue. So I'm going to get a look at this dog. I do this for a living. I can't afford to have a house pet. All of my dogs have to be working dogs until they retire. So, I want the opportunity to kind of test it, a little naturability, see what mom and dad gave it, and if it's going to fit for me. But I run a mixed bag. I do have a lot of short hairs because they tend to have availability. So I'm running 4 GSPs right now. I have 2 German wire hair pointers. I have 1 lab, the matriarch, who is now retired, Miss Luna. She's enjoying, we call her Snacks. Now that's her nickname. I do have a red setter. I just had to actually think about my own string for a minute.
Mm-hmm.
Yep, that's it. So I have 8.
Okay.
8 total right now.
Yeah, we'd have about 16 to 18 dogs.
Mm-hmm.
And those were puppies coming up, retirees, and then a block of about 10, 12 dogs in that middle, that were first string or nearly so. They're in the on any given day,
quote unquote. They're in the meat of their hunting performance cycle. So they're at the peak. So I've always tried to get mine about 2 years apart. I veered from that a little while ago and ended up getting litter mates, which I said I would never do. It worked out fantastic, brother and sister. And they hunt fantastically together. I have 0 issues. None of the, littermate syndrome that we've all heard about, which happens, but they work, fantastically together. So I generally like to have a 2-year gap between my dogs because exactly that. You've got your seniors that are aging out. You've got your juniors that are started dogs. You're going to mix them in with your seasoned dogs and get them out with clients and let them develop. So you've always got that cycle going.
Right. Now we would keep whole litters.
Wow.
Yeah. And I might let a few go, but those typically were dogs that then came back for training with me, and then they would go back to mom and dad. But I didn't mind raising 4 or 5 dogs in from one litter in one group. Yeah. Yeah.
That takes a heck of a lot of patience is what that takes.
Well, there was some benefit to it because, we had the infrastructure here. It's now, it left earlier today, but,
thank you for that.
But we had enough hard structure here that I could put half a dozen puppies in an area, and man, they just wear each other out.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. So, I'd go in and jostle and play with them, and socialize them a bit, but they were perpetual motion, just tearing themselves up, so there was some benefit in that, but up to a certain age. And then you'd see that kind of separation, male, female. And you'd see, typically the males would defer to the females, on some issues, and you'd have to be careful. And at some point you kind of have to separate them out and let them develop on their own, but you can see that coming typically.
I think you probably avoid a lot of the pack order issues by having all from the same litter because they've developed that already throughout their lives. They're always going to be challenging each other a little bit. Mm-hmm. But I think you probably alleviate some of that. And I think what you said with them wearing each other out, that's usually the tough one. I have a lot of married couples or couples that come down and bought their first bird dog, and I'm training it for them, doing weekend training. So doing my day training program. So, they come in for bird work. We do obedience. I send them home with homework. And, they have that question of how do I get the energy out of this dog living where I live? And what is the best thing I can do for its behavior? And they're not fond of my answer. It's usually get another dog.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
The best thing to exercise that dog and to keep its mind occupied and keep things from being destroyed where you're going is someone to play with. So
right.
Get another dog.
Yeah. Yeah. Do you have a favorite dog?
Ooh, as far as breed?
Well, in terms of hunting style, or you think you...
when you have an odd mixed bag like I do, it's almost like you've got Swiss Army knives.
Mm-hmm.
Everybody's got what style they like, of what style of hunting. But there's an application and weather conditions and bird sending conditions that applies to each type of dog you have. If I've got horrible bird scent, blue skies, hot, no wind, scent evaporating straight up, I need my trackers on the ground. And I know which ones of my dogs are the best trackers. And you need to be able to identify that. And then I've got my straight air centers that they're not really good at tracking. Then I've got Luna she's going to be a tough one to replace on the ground because we call her Queen of the Dead. There's not a dead bird that will get away from that dog. Every other pointer I've got is going to be off hunting and lost interest in finding this bird at some point. She is relentless. I've gone back with her 4 hours later because I knew the bird was down and we wanted to continue hunting, and gone back to the location and found that bird later in the afternoon. So do I have a favorite dog? No, I have dogs that I prefer in certain situations. Because all of my dogs hunt extremely well. I'm happy with all of them, but they all have their own style. A lot of it's what your personal preference on appearance is, how you like them to run. But, you've seen it too. You've seen short hairs out of the same bloodlines. One of them's a loper, and he's kind of a casual milling around hunter. And then you've got some ranging rockets that are doing the classic windshield wiper, sweeping back and forth at 100 yards to each side. So again, you can train a lot of things into the dog, but mom and dad gave it what it gave it. So those genetic behaviors are there, and you can tune them. I don't really think I have a favorite. I was trying to think if there's any breed that I would never own. I don't think I can say that. There's some I'm not that fond of, but I would never say never.
Uh-huh. Yeah. I've had most breeds. I liked setters, mm-hmm. and that was our predominant bulk of our string was always setters, our own blood setters, just because there was a predictability to it. And to be fair, setters have a certain personality, a certain softness to them.
They do.
Yeah. They're a good keep, mm-hmm. They're not necessarily for everybody, but, if it fits for you, mm-hmm. it's often a pretty good fit. And then I would typically have 2 to 3 short hairs in the mix, mm-hmm. and 1 retriever, and that would be the string. I take 10 dogs on the road, and 8 to 10, depending on how many days I was going to be on the road, from light to light.
Yes, sir.
Yeah. Light to light.
That's what, I had people ask me the optimal number of dogs. For what I do for a living, guiding, training, obviously, I make a living at it too. But for guiding, I think if you're a professional guide, 6 dogs is your minimum. And that's if you set up a cycle. Like I prefer a 3 days on, 2 day off cycle. Oh. And I use the rabbit ear quotations because the dogs need rest.
Yeah.
Not me. I'm fine. No. But yeah, no. So a 3 day on, 2 day off cycle, it works really well. It doesn't always work out that way. I end up, mm-hmm. booking heavy, whatever. You got to cover the days and having that extra dog power. But you know how it is. You've always got one that's injured, one that's got a bacterial issue, or a cactus got it and you've got an abscess. There's always something going on. And I want 4 dogs runnable at all times. So I think, 6 is probably that bare minimum for me. 10 is a lot. That's a lot to travel with.
Yeah, it is. But I could stay on the road.
Oh yeah.
With 10 dogs, and I could rotate them through. And my schedule was, 1 day on, meaning I would have a brace in the morning, and I would often run a setter and a short hair together, or 2 setters for that morning brace. When we were running big open grass, Scaley's maybe, or Gamble's open country. And then 10, 11 o'clock we come in, and then we put another dog down. Maybe it's a single, maybe it's maybe a setter and a short hair. And we'd work until the scent died. Okay. And whenever that was, maybe that's 11:15, maybe that's 1:45. Then we'd take a siesta, and somewhere around 3:30, 4 o'clock, you'd feel the cool come back into the air, and we'd start again. And so I could run a short hair, like a setter and a short hair in the morning, and then a fresh setter for that midday brace, fresh setter for that evening brace, but I'd run the same short hair. So that short hair would have a full day. And then the next day, I would run the other short hair, and I'd kind of swap them. So they would, because they never ran as big as the setters. Okay. So the setters would have a lot more time in between. So a setter they'd have 1 day on, 2 days off, 1 day on, 2 days off. But I couldn't afford days off. Yeah.
Similar. I mean, when I'm guiding, I usually carry 4 dogs with me for the day. And, I run, depends on the client and the fitness level. As a guide in Mearns country, our average day is 10 to 13 miles, sometimes 14 miles.
Yeah.
So for the dogs, every dog I put on the ground is usually running between 20 and 30 miles a day, even based with rotation. So I'll drop 2 fresh dogs in the morning, do 1 loop. If the weather holds, we'll do 1 major loop and get back to the trucks at lunch. If the weather's not holding, I'll shorten that loop and we'll do 2 before lunch. And then, so I'll run 2 fresh dogs. Then I run a fresh dog and one that ran that first run. Then we break for lunch. And then I put 2 fresh dogs down for the horrible run, which is a hard sell sometimes. It's hard to sell it to a client that scent conditions are horrid and we are spinning our wheels. We're going to get lucky and run into some birds, but we should probably break for a little bit and then let it cool. And if you can't sell it, you're going to make 2 loops in the afternoon. And, because after all, it's their hunt and we're going to do what we need to do. So usually it's run 2 fresh dogs after the lunch break and then a fresh and a not fresh at the end of the day. And it typically works well, with the style of hunting I'm doing, especially in Mearns country.
I remember years ago, I had a young kid. He was, mid-20s, knew everything. And, we had a good morning. And then I said, time for break, and we'll have a siesta. And I would break out lounge chairs, and we'd find a shady spot under some mesquite trees. And I'd had a lunch set up, sandwiches and goodies and all the marvels Costco could provide. And I'd encourage him to take a nap, and he looks at me like I was out of my mind. I mean, he was here to hunt. Okay. And, I explained to him that we could go ahead and burn a dog up, but we weren't going to produce anything. And, he was having no part of it. So I said, yes, sir, it is your day. So I picked the one bulletproof dog I had, whoever had the most left. And I remember we were out on Willow Springs and you could see the Black Mountains in the distance on the horizon. And I picked a peak, I just walked a straight line. And I walked to the Black Mountains and I turned around, I walked back. And I think we produced 1 bird, didn't kill anything. And of course, wore him out. So he was much more malleable after that. So I can feel your pain when you say that, because I know exactly what you mean.
I've got my oldest wire hair. We call him the king. He's got the best nose of any dog I've ever owned, and he knew it. And he knew after lunch if I was going to make a run, he saw me look at him, and he knew he was going to get the crap run of the day. It's like, why do I have to get the heat? Well, it's not my fault. You have the best nose. He's gonna track him out no matter what. So,
right.
Slow, methodical, catwalking track, and you have to be patient. But he will produce.
You live with your dogs.
I do.
And so your dogs are in the house with you. And describe that to me, because a lot of folks have a concept that a hunting dog can't be a personal dog, can't be an in-house family dog, can't be a whatever.
Yeah, that's the old school methods. The old original, I'd say even pre-Delmar training methods and that methodology. And you still hear it today. But it's this similar concept of, this is how my grandfather trained his dogs. This is how I trained mine. No fault to it, to each their own. And this is my take on it. This is my opinion. A kennel dog, so you have to have, there's two options. You can have your dogs live in a kennel, and their only human interaction, their only touch, their only opportunity for food and water is when you attend to them. That, by default, makes you the alpha. The only, Pavlov's responded conditioning, food, water, touch. That's what's going to create a salivary response. The only time that happens is when you are present. So you're by default the alpha, and it is easier. By far, it's easier. But I love my dogs, and I love the company, and I love having them in the relationship. But that does create the dilemmas of, you as an owner have to take the time to learn and understand pack behavior, because you're living in the pack at that point. You're not defaulted to alpha. You are part of the pack, and you have to be the alpha. So I think a little bit of studying and education and learning does basics, because we as people tend to try to push human behavior characteristics on the dogs. It's a heck of a lot easier for you to learn how to act like a dog than it is to do the opposite. So, but the little things that, if you just read the basics on pack behavior, little things that make you the boss. Typically in the wild, alphas eat first, everybody eats after. I used to do it with my puppies when I did young ones. I would sit down with a bowl of dog food and just pick it up and pretend like I'm eating it. And then when I was done, I fed them. Alpha eats first, they get what's left over. Alpha goes first. Go through that door. The rest of the pack can go through the door after you allow that. Those little nuances, but you have to be the pack leader, and you have to do it in your home. And it stops a lot of confusion for the dog. And as well as I do, dogs never, that desire to move up in pack order never leaves until they know they're out. Like Luna at this point, my eldest, she knows she's at the end of the line, and she stopped fighting for that pack. So my next female is pushing up to be next in line, Bella. I think I have a data sheet that I give all of my clients that kind of explains some of the behavior stuff. And it's, we as humans look at our female dogs as our daughters. They are not looking at it in the same way. You are the alpha, and they are next in line to be your mate. So there is the female that's in charge, and then there's the next one in line. And that next one in line is going to poke at that one if there's ever a weakness. And if you'll notice, the dogs do it to you. If you've ever got an injury, a cut, an illness, they come to check to make sure you're still in charge. I think another good example is, people ask me how, because I used to eat in the living room floor on the coffee table, and my dogs would all keep a safe distance from me. And I'm not sitting there saying, no, get back, leave it. None of that's required. Speak dog. When they're a puppy, if you sit down at that table with your food and they get too close within range, show your teeth and give them a little growl. They understand that, and it's bred into them. And people find it hilarious, but it works. They'll take about 2 steps back and go, I just overstepped my boundary. So that's kind of maybe an extreme example, but examples of, you have to learn how to have these dogs in your home as a pack and still be the pack leader. So there's difficulties that come with it, but there's rewards that come with it as well. Those dogs, my dogs hunt for me. That bond is there. And that was created through them living in my home.
Yeah. And I've, I enjoy dogs. I like being around dogs. And we've always had a lot of dogs. And what we did ultimately is we segmented a bedroom and living room that they couldn't get into. And then the rest of the house they had access to, so because sometimes you just had enough and you need to.
Oh, you got to separate.
Yeah. You got to. And
you have to have that separation.
And they would sit right on the other side of that gate. Wait.
I do it now. It's called clean sheet night. So I stage my dogs. My youngest are in kennels. And I have kennels in my bedroom. I have kennels in my living room. But my youngest are usually kenneled. If there's downtime that they need to be secured, or at night, they're kenneled in the house. The mid-range ones have beds on the floor, and then there's usually an elite elder or one or two of them that actually get to sleep with me. And you have to be careful with that as a pack leader as well. The senior dogs still have to understand that. So that's usually my rotation, but there's one night a week when I do laundry and I have clean sheets. They're all staying elsewhere. That's my, I'm going to secure my bedroom.
That's the line.
I am by myself at least once a week. So
yeah,
very similar to that. But that's my downtime, my breathing time. And you have to have that decompression from it at some point, especially when you're training other people's dogs and you have that many of your own.
Right. Well, I know you are probably ready to head home. You've got quite a drive. And I do enjoy having these conversations and talking with you about this sort of stuff. I did want to, and I went through, you have got my force break table.
Yes.
Okay. I don't know if you have this book. Do you have, this Delmar's book?
I do have that one.
You do?
There's an old trainer that I worked with in my prior job before I retired. That was IT. He was with he handled over our computers. And he gifted me that book. He was an old trainer from way back, and I have a hard copy of that. That was probably one of my first reads.
And this specifically is Best Way to Train Your Gun Dog, the Delmar Smith Method. Yes. It was written by Bill Tarrant, Tarrant, published by McKay Press out of Sedona, I believe. I don't have my glasses on, but I think that's what it is. And I went through my bookshelf. I got 3 copies, and this was my working copy. It lived on the big trailer all the years I was training. But Tarrant had signed it for me, so I didn't want to give it away.
Oh, that's awesome.
You have it already then?
I do.
Okay.
And I recommend any budding trainer. That is one of the books that I recommend. And
that's a foundation book.
It is. Yeah. And there's some old school stuff that may not be happy with it these days. But I was talking to my training assistant, Wes. It's called The Toolbox. There's dogs they're going to challenge you to the point that they're going to exceed your methods. You're going to run out of a way to fix this problem at a point, and you better have a whole lot of tools in your toolbox. I know 6 different ways to teach whoa. You better have that because you're going to have to change it. And that old book is full. It's a great little addition to have some stuff in your toolbox.
Right. Yeah. And you go back, I mean, there's some great stuff, Brown in 30s, and there's some real wisdom back there. And again, much of it dated, but it all had very specific reasons why it worked.
And yes.
And dogs haven't changed that much, No,
and I think the turning point for me as a trainer, where I understood the mechanics, the tasks that need to be completed, but understanding how to apply it through a good behavioral conditioning model, and what you're actually doing. That turning point for me was, and if you don't mind me plugging the book, it's Dr. Joan Bailey, How Dogs Learn. That was really the first book that I found that took operant behavioral conditioning, which doesn't matter. It applies to humans. It applies to anything, but they really applied it to dogs specifically and explained it in a way that is fairly easy to understand without a psychology degree. I think that was a turning point for me. That's when my toolbox expanded. That's when I started understanding the why of the things I was applying and how to better apply them. And that's when you start developing kind of your signature techniques. Everybody's got, I'm sure you have your own drills that I don't know about, that was little tricks that you learned that worked. And I think that's when you start developing, really, really developing as a trainer.
Right. Well, how can folks reach you?
Website is number one, which is LunaRitaOutfitters.com. And then I also have an Instagram account, which is LunaRita Outfitters. LunaRita Outfitters page on Facebook, as well as my persona, my identity on Facebook, I think is LunaRita. When I originally started it, it's actually my dog. So it's actually her site. Mm-hmm. But that's the primaries. And then my phone numbers and email addresses are on all of those accessible. So yeah, I greatly appreciate you having me on.
And you have, you are available for training. Folks just need to contact you, and then depending how your schedule is and when you get dogs in, and
yeah, we stay pretty heavy. So we do run 2 programs. I run a weekend training, which is if you want to be involved as the owner, you sign up, you come in, you do a day session on birds, then we do obedience, and then I send you home with homework. And you continue as you can, and we progress through the summer and get your dog as far along as we can based on your attendance. And then the board and train program, which is monthly based, and we do an evaluation and then decide if it's a started dog, what the minimum time is versus if we're doing finishing work, some polishing stuff.
And you use principally pigeons in your training?
So all new dogs, I'm starting on pigeons.
Yeah.
And then we transition to game birds sort of toward the end.
Down that road of
that. And yeah, I don't know if we don't even have time to get into the whys behind that, but pigeons fly good, they smell bad, and dogs generally don't catch them. Those are the 3 primaries.
They launch, they go up in the air, they make 3 big circles, and then they fly away.
Yes.
Yeah.
As opposed to that pen raised quail, which may land 10 feet away and your dog caught it. Now you just had a big old reset.
Yeah.
And you're starting.
Now you have a problem.
Yes.
Yeah. Let's begin again.
Yeah. So, there's always the pluses and negatives of somebody's going to argue with you about using pigeons versus not using pigeons.
I like pigeons.
Scent is scent.
Yeah. I like pigeons.
Yes. Scent is scent, and dogs generally don't catch them.
Yeah. And it's not the thing they're going to be spending the rest of their life hunting either. You know, you can work all that stuff out on a bird that isn't going to have a carry through that you need to worry about. Right. Well, Kelly, thank you so much.
Thank you for having me.
And folks, we're going to sign off. I appreciate you listening. Had an enjoyable time, and Kelly had his work cut out today, helping Wes and I move stuff. So he's got a long drive home. So, with that, we're going to sign off. I do appreciate your interest. If you are of a mind, go ahead and hit the subscribe button. It helps us in a lot of ways. And we do look forward to these conversations. And we look forward to doing this in the future and developing the free-range dog concept. With that, this is Webb Parton signing off. You have a wonderful day, and go out and have some fun with your dog. Take care. If you like this episode, I invite you to visit our website, freerangedogs.com. It's where you can find the stuff you need to live the free-range dog lifestyle. I want to help you with that. Book a consultation call or an in-person training, attend one of our ongoing events, or join our online membership program. We got it all on freerangedogs.com. All right. It's time to head back to the truck and the water bucket for the thirsty dogs. This is Webb Parton signing off, wishing you the boundless joy that comes when you share the outdoors with your best friend.